is all about graphs, right? We're going to talk about all the graphs of these functions that we've been talking about. So this section is about some basic characteristics. First one being x and y intercepts. Oh, x and y intercepts. Nothing new here. You guys have heard about the x and y intercepts for years and years and years, probably in middle school. It is where the graph crosses the x or the y-axis, one or the other, where it crosses the x-axis. The key to this is that the y-coordinate is always 0. So right here, 1, 0, -3, 0. And then when it comes to the y-intercept, it's where it crosses the y-axis, and this time the x-coordinate is 0. So for this guy over here at 0, 6, okay, over here we've got, this one's a y-intercept, so it's 0 for x, -1 for y. Right here is an intercept, that's touching the x-axis, so that's going to be 2, 0. So x and y intercepts, nothing new there. You guys learned it a long time ago where it crosses the axes. Sorry. Okay, so next we're going to talk about intervals. And again, this should be something that you've learned before, but we're just doing a quick little review. What we mostly need to talk about is that you can rewrite an inequality like this in what's called interval notation. Interval notation is simply, it's a way to write it, but we take out the less than's, greater than, less than or equal to, and we write it as a set of numbers between two values. So an interval like this, -1 to 3, -1, x is between those guys, these right here, -1 and 3. To write in interval notation, you put a comma between the two values when it's a between like this, and then you either say if it's open or closed. Now an interval is open when it does not include the endpoints, and you use parentheses. It is closed when you do include the endpoints, and we use brackets. And then for infinity, this symbol, you always use parentheses. So how do you know if it's open or closed? Well, if it was on a number line, we'd have this open circle right here. That means it does not include it. It's open there. Over here, it's also open. So our final interval would be like that. Okay, this next example, this time it starts over here at -2. Right, it says x greater than or equal to -2. This is what it looks like on the number line. But the farthest right it goes is infinity. It's got that arrow that lets you know it goes on forever. So we would say comma infinity. Now infinity is always parentheses, so put a parentheses there. And then at -2, when we look at the circle, if it's closed in like that, that means it's closed or including. So you would put a bracket right there. Okay, this next one right here, there are two separate ones. So we're going to describe each one separately. Every time you do an interval notation, there is a left and a right. And then it's either parentheses or brackets, depending on the including or not including. So when you look at this graph right here, this inequality, how far left does this guy go? Well, he goes to infinity. We call him negative infinity because he's going in the negative direction. So the left value for this guy is negative infinity, comma. The right value is at 0. Infinities are always parentheses. And when you look at 0, you see that it's open, which means we're going to put in parentheses. And on the same graph as this other one over here, it starts at 4, comma, and then you say, well, how far right does it go? Goes to infinity, positive infinity, because to the right is the positive x values. Okay, infinity is always parentheses. You look at the 4 and go, okay, wait, that one's closed. It's colored in, which means there's a bracket. And then the final thing to put in there, since there are two intervals, you just put this U-looking thing in between, and that lets us know that they're unioned, or that those two go together. All right, so let's talk about domain and range first of all. Domain is the input. It's all the x values that you're putting in, and the range is all the y values that are coming out. Now that doesn't make a whole lot of sense when we're not actually evaluating functions, when we're just talking about graphs. So the domain is all of the x values that the graph crosses. And I'm going to show you what I mean by crosses in just a sec. So the range is going to be all the y values that the graph crosses. Now I'm putting crosses in quotation marks because the graph's not necessarily crossing at that x-intercept. It is crossing somewhere along that line. So right here at x equals 2, if I were to draw a line up, it crosses it, quote unquote, if the graph goes through that value right there. Here's the graph. Okay, so I drew my purple line up and I said, oh, it does cross. All right, what about here at 3? Yep, does cross. What about here at 2.5-ish? Yep. What about here at 5? No, the graph stopped right there. So these orange values in between here, these are basically the x values that if I were to draw a vertical line at that x value, this graph, the black line, would cross that at some point. Not on the x-axis. Don't get confused. These aren't values on the x-axis. It's does it cross it somewhere on its way to infinity or negative infinity. So that's domain. Now, as far as range goes, it's the same idea, but now we're going to look at the y values. So we're looking left to right, or sorry, up and down rather than left to right. But it's the same idea. If I were to draw a line right here at y equals 1, does it cross the graph somewhere? Yeah, it crosses right there. Right, here's my graph again. Crosses right there. Okay, let's say we draw a graph at 0.5. Does it cross? Yep, right there. How about at 0.25? Yep, right there. So everything in between these two blue lines are part of the range. Now to describe them, you look at the values, the highest value and the lowest value, or the leftmost value and the rightmost value. So graphically, as far as the domain is concerned, when I say the x values and the graph, where the graph crosses, what I mean by is that interval of values where my lines would cross them. So for the range right here, everything in between 1 and 4, anything, 1.5, 2, 3, anything like that, all of those will have lines that when I draw them vertically, I end up crossing it. And then the same thing with the range. It crosses if you can draw a vertical line at that value. So the domain is going to be the leftmost value to the rightmost. And then either parentheses or brackets. The range is the lowest going up or down and the highest. So this guy is vertically. This guy is horizontally. Okay, let's look at these. Let's talk about the x and y intercepts and the domain and range. Okay, looking at that graph. Let's start with x and y intercepts. Anywhere the graph crosses this x-axis is an x-intercept. So we've got an x-intercept happening there and there. So I'm going to say x-intercepts at -4, 0, and 4, 0. All right, now we're going to do some y-intercepts. Looks like it crosses right there. That's where it crosses this y-axis. I'm going to say y-intercept is at 0, 2. All right. Now let's talk domain. So I need to look at that graph and picture having this little arrow on here. Okay, this little line right here, that's going to be my barriers. Whoops, just kidding. Go back. It's going to be my little barriers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take kind of the middle of the graph and I'm going to start moving it left. And then as soon as I get to the point to where I cross the last little bit of the graph, I'm going to stop. So if I go beyond that point to the left, the graph will no longer cross that vertical line, that blue line. Okay, that happens at -5. So that is my left value, comma. Okay, now I'm going to pick up that stick again, and I'm going to move to the right this time. It's frozen. Don't break. Oh, it broke. Oh, hello. Intermission. Okay, sorry about that. I think I got it to work again. It was having a little tantrum. Okay, so we figured out how far left the graph went. Now I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to move it to the right. And I'm going to keep going until I get to the last line that I could draw before I run out of graph. It looks like that one happens at, let's see, count by 1, so 8, 9, 10. So we're going to say that the right endpoint is 10. Get that. Go. I always forget. Now we're going to decide if it's parentheses or brackets. So looking at over here on the left, this point, it was closed, which means this 5 is going to be a bracket. Now if you look over here at this 10, it's open, so that one's going to be a parentheses. Okay, let's talk about range next. Make this line purple. This line I'm going to draw horizontally because that's how we determine domain and range. Right? All right, I'm going to start. Write this out. With our range, I need a lowest value and a highest value. So here's my purple line. I'm going, 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 going. This is the last point I can go before I run out of graph to cross. So that's going to be at -3. That's the lowest. And then I'm going to take it and I'm going to go up, up, up. Or it's going to freeze again. You know, whatever. It's all good. Stupid thing. I'll be back. All right, so I'm taking this purple thing and I'm going, going, going. Now it looks like it might be there, right? Except when you look out further, because we're talking about the whole thing, you can actually keep going all the way up to there. So actually the highest point, the last place the graph crosses, would be at y equals 3. Okay, again with the open or close down here in that left-hand corner at -3, that's a circle. It's closed in, so it's a bracket. The other one's open, so it's going to be a parentheses. All right, let's try this next one over here. So x-intercepts, looking at that x-axis line right there, right? Does it ever cross? Mm-mm. So we would say x-intercepts, there are none, or you could say NA, or, you know, anything like that. Just don't even know what's up with this computer. Stripping out. Oops. 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 How many times can you say it? X-intercepts, there are none. Y-intercepts, right here. Looks 0, 2. Okay, now let's look at our arrows, our lines. If this circle would ever go away. It's just running and running, I give up. Oh, there it is. Okay, let's look at our graph. We're going to go from around the middle to the left, to the left, to the right, to the right. Just kidding. To the left, to the left. Now this arrow right here on the end means you can go on forever and ever. So for my domain, I'm going to say that how far left does it go is to -infinity, comma. Okay, blue thing. Oh my gosh, I'm just going to scream. I'll finish this in the next video.